Hello and welcome to episode 239 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. This show is going live on August 27th of 2025, and Destination D23 is happening this weekend in Florida. That means that we will probably be getting more news about new attractions that will be replacing old ones at Walt Disney World. While a lot of the news about closures has been upsetting to Disney fans, today's episode is hopefully going to cheer up those same fans. Maz will be here, and the two of us will talk about some of our favorite attractions that no longer exist at Walt Disney World. This is just serving as a reminder that we have lost things we have loved in the past, and that we will still find new things to love in the parks. Before we get started, stop everything you're doing right now. Take 30 seconds and make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We still have thousands of more people listening to our podcast every week on YouTube than are subscribed to the channel. That's great, and we appreciate all of you for listening. Still, we have seemed to hit another plateau with subscribers. For over 4.5 years, we have busted our butts on this podcast, and we have not asked for a dime for ourselves. We've raised money for charity, but we haven't personally profited. Please help us spread the word. Even if you listen to us on another platform, just clicking on that subscribe button on YouTube helps us. Now let's get things started with today's conversation. Thanks for being here, Maz.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So we were originally going to rank attractions at Walt Disney World that no longer exist. But I think as we started discussing this, we were putting too much thought into, oh, well, this is number 4, and maybe if it's on my list, it shouldn't be on your list. And we decided that we were just going to sort of open it up to a conversation about attractions, shows, experiences at Walt Disney World that no longer exist. And one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this is because we are losing a lot at Walt Disney World. We continue to lose things, and maybe it's good to remind ourselves of the things that we thought were so critical to a Walt Disney World vacation. And we thought, every time I go, I have to do this thing and I have to do this thing. And you've gone now since those things have closed down and you still love it. So I'm not saying we don't miss these things, but sometimes it's important to remember that we have already lost a lot of things that we really loved, and we still love these theme parks. So let's keep everything in perspective. There's a lot going on in the world right now, and sometimes a theme park ride closing isn't the worst thing.
Yeah, it can definitely seem like the end of the world, but it keeps turning. But it also is nice to look back and fondly remember, the rides of bygone days.
So I think I'm going to start with a ride that gets a name check on one of my favorite rides that still exists. And that is If You Had Wings. And this was a ride in Tomorrowland. And I think that just right there expresses why this was important, because it was a ride in Tomorrowland, and we need more of those. So If You Had Wings was sponsored by Eastern Airlines. It was definitely one of those commercial rides. And there was also a ride a few years before that. It didn't last very long, but it was called Flight to the Moon. It lasted from 1971 to 1975. And I wanted to bring up those two rides because I think we need more going on in Tomorrowland. Even since Tron opened, I still think it doesn't feel like a fully fleshed out land. And I know you're going to get to that at some point in your list as well. But I also wanted to bring up the two moments when you're on the TTA People Mover where these two rides get name checked. So at the very beginning of the People Mover, they make an announcement over the loudspeaker that if you have wings, you want to pull them in and make sure that they aren't outside of the car. The moment that they say that is when you are looking across at where it used to be if you had wings, the old show, ride, whatever you want to call it. And of course, Flight to the Moon. We all know that when you are coming out now of Space Mountain, I think is when you get it now. They say, paging Mr. Morrow, contact Mr. Johnson to confirm your flight to the moon. So there they sort of had a nice little tease of some of these, a little memorial of some of these rides that no longer exist. So, Maz, what's something that you miss at Walt Disney World?
Well, I'll just follow you right into Tomorrowland and get this off my list. I am going to say Stitch's Great Escape slash Alien Encounter. Now, I am not saying, let's be clear, I am not saying that either of these was a perfect ride. I think Alien Encounter in its original form was too scary for something at Magic Kingdom. And I think Stitch's Great Escape needed some tweaks. Let's just say certain scents weren't necessarily the best decision. But I will say they both filled a critical space in Tomorrowland that since its closure, it has sat empty. There is nothing in that building. And like you said, even though we have Tron now, it's still pushed back. Like it almost feels like its own little area. And it's not necessarily part of that Tomorrowland hub that's right there. And I think having another ride in that section was really beneficial to crowd flow and keeping people moving and helping keeping other lines shorter. And I miss just having another option.
And I remember when I first moved to Florida in 2019, Alien Encounter and Stitch's Great Escape, they had been closed, but they were at least using the queue for a Stitch meet and greet. And they stopped that at the pandemic closure and they never brought that back. And that would at least give you something to do in Tomorrowland. There is a lot of wasted space there. And I think that might go into another one that I had on my list. I wasn't going to put it here, but because we are sticking to Tomorrowland, this started in Tomorrowland, took you to Fantasyland, where you turned around and went back to Tomorrowland, and that is the Skyway. It lasted from 1971 to 1999, and when I went in 2005, it was my first time going as an adult. It was the first time I was there since I was maybe 12. And I have since gotten used to it because I spent so much time at Magic Kingdom without the Skyway there. But I was like, wait, how is this not? It was such an important part of Magic Kingdom, I felt. And I understand that Disney was probably very, very worried that something could go wrong with people having their feet dangling over traffic patterns that were going on below them. And they probably dodged a lot of bullets by having nothing happen in the years that it was open. But I still think it had that kinetic energy that Disney loves to have in their parks. The people mover going by, and then you see the train in the distance, and there's a monorail going past the Contemporary, and then there's people on the Skyway. It was something that wasn't the most exciting ride in the world, but it sort of made it feel alive in the parks.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to jump over to Fantasyland for my next one. And I'm going to bring up Snow White's Scary Adventures. And again, this is not a case of I wish we didn't get its replacement kind of thing. I get why it was removed. I understand it. But there is something about that kind of classic dark ride that I absolutely love. And I know it is not the most exciting thing. I know that there are other rides that have longer lines that will sell more lightning lanes. I get it. But to me, there is something about the format that it had where you really felt like you were stepping into this classic movie in a very classic way. And we lost a lot of that in Disney World over the time, or we lost a lot of that in Disney World through different expansions and things like that. But I really love that feeling. I love that everyone can do it. And it's one of those that, especially this one, was such a great, like, age, coming of age kind of ride where you ride it as a kid when you're little and you're terrified and you're like, oh my God, that witch, she is going to attack me. This is terrifying. And then you get to go back in a few years when you're older and you're like, that's what I was afraid of. And it is just such a great experience to have over, years and years. So yeah, I do miss that.
I'm going to turn Maz into a GIF now, and it's just going to be her going, that witch, that witch.
Please.
Um, I would use it a lot, trust me. It's a great point. I'm obviously going to mention a dark ride from Fantasyland in a second, but what replaced it? People will say, well, it was replaced by Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, which always has 90-minute waits, 120-minute waits. It's one of the most popular rides in all of Walt Disney World. But Seven Dwarfs Mine Train didn't replace Snow White's Scary Adventure. A princess meet and greet replaced Snow White's Scary Adventure. And I love that we have the princess meet and greets, but they could have found a lot of different places to have those and still had a dark ride. Even if you get rid of Snow White's Scary Adventure because you're already going to have Snow White on the mountain, replace it with another dark ride. Give us something where we can get in line and we can ride something that doesn't have to be a major e-ticket attraction. And to say, oh, well, we already have that intellectual property represented in this land. When you have a Beauty and the Beast show in Enchanted Tales with Belle, and a store, and a restaurant, and a quick service restaurant, and you have a meet and greet with Ariel, and you have Ariel's ride, you could have 2 Snow White rides in Fantasyland. It's one of the most important intellectual properties in the history of the company. It's the reason we have these theme parks in the first place. So I don't think you necessarily have to get rid of that ride to add another Snow White ride. Plus, why does Mine Train have to be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? That could have been another one of your many intellectual properties. But even more importantly, and I think this is where we can all agree, we're going to move to my list. Why do you replace Mr. Toad's Wild Ride with the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh? They have the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh at Disneyland, and they were able to add it and keep Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and they have less space over there. So why are we losing one of the greatest dark rides? And the Walt Disney World version was better. There was 2 different sides. It had 2 different stories. You got to experience something different every time you rode it. And listen, love Winnie the Pooh. One of the best intellectual properties owned by Disney. You're going to get a smile on your face when you see Pooh Bear. But Mr. Toad's Wild Ride was so unique and so kitschy And I think he would have been a Figment style character now that people would look at, and he would just push merch if that ride still existed. I think he would have had a huge resurgence. And I tell you what, I'm ready to pour one out for J. Thaddeus Toad, because the fact that we don't have this ride anymore is just awful.
You actively walked me back on my Snow White stance of accepting its disappearance. And now, I'm back to being angry about it. But, and you might just block me right now on every platform, but I'm a Mr. Toad hater. So, I'll take Winnie the Pooh any day over that terror of a ride.
Listen, I'm not gonna lie, that hurts. Like, you know, you don't like when, the people in your life say things that just hurt at your core. But I do think that this is the kind of attraction, and I'm not saying don't have Winnie the Pooh. I'm just saying you can have both. And I feel like Fantasyland right now, it used to be when I was a kid, you could have one of your park days be Fantasyland. There were a ton of dark rides. They all had substantial waits, but not the longest waits in the park. There was Dumbo, there was Mr. Toad, there was Snow White, there was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, there was Small World, there was Peter Pan. Like, you could spend the majority of your park day in Fantasyland. And now I spend more of my time walking through Fantasyland to get to something I really want to do than ever stopping.
Yeah. That's definitely true. And I do think that, like you said, having more of those dark rides, it makes a difference. It does, because it does help bring weights down. And yeah, maybe I wouldn't love it to be Mr. Toad, but if that's the sacrifice I have to make for a better Fantasyland experience.
What do you have against Mr. Toad?
Look, that's the ride that I rode as like a 4-year-old and it traumatized me. Um, so, this is the thing. I never got to go back and heal the child that was traumatized by Mr. Toad. Um, I did as an adult, but it's not quite the same. But it was
Okay.
enough that as a
All
kid,
right.
was like, I'm never doing this again. Um,
I like when there is something that's just a little tiny adult in Disney. Like,
yeah.
I don't I don't want there to be raunchy things. Like, I'm not saying we need like dirty jokes on rides, but I just like, whether it's, the old country bears where it's just a little adult. And that's something that I liked about Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, was that it felt like, even as a Fantasyland ride, it was just a little adult, and you could feel just like a little bit when you were 12 going, yeah, this is like cool, right?
Yeah, I think if I had ridden it at the right time in my life, I would be like a staunch Mr. Toad defender. I do fully believe that.
All right, so what are some other attractions that you have that you are just missing at Walt Disney World?
All right, well, I'm going to pull us out of Magic Kingdom and I'm going to take us over to Epcot for a ride that still exists, is actively being revamped, but I miss a former version of it, and that is Test Track. And now Test Track 3.0, and I'm crossing my fingers, I love it. Test Track 2.0 was obviously a crowd pleaser, but I preferred 1.0. Give me those crash test dummies back, please. That was, in my opinion, the best version of the ride. It was the most pure edutainment version of the ride. And I think it had this great balance of really teaching you different aspects of the car and how, what things were important. And it did have a little bit of that fear factor where you're looking at these crash test dummies and you're going, I don't want to be that. And there is just a touch of that that made it really fun. And then you start to accelerate at the end and you're going, oh my gosh, I'm going to run into this wall. This is it. I'm going to be the crash test dummy. But then you sail right through and you get to speed around that track. And, it's such a great version of the ride that I think stands for everything in that like pure Epcot sense. And I think 2.0 lost that a little bit.
So I'm going to say a number of things. I have a number of thoughts to what you just said. The first one is, yes, we haven't had the chance to ride 3.0 yet. I can't wait to get the chance. It looks like it's really cool. 2.0 was definitely a downgrade. I felt like this was a cheap version of something that Disney did that I could have gotten a lot of other places. And it never felt to me like it was worthy of a Disney park. Like the ride itself was fun, but it was the same ride mechanic as the first one. All of the theming to it I thought was really a waste, and it really didn't feel Disney worthy to me. I know what they were trying to do, but I don't feel like they accomplished that. And then when Tron finally did open, it really made it not worth it. I thought the crash test dummies were amazing. I thought it was funny. I thought that original version was great and it should have stayed. But I do have to point out that you just spent 5 minutes talking about how you hated Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And then you went on to explain a ride that, for all intents and purposes, was the exact same as Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. But you just spent the last 5 minutes describing Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, but on a different ride vehicle and
a different ride vehicle. Maybe that's all it needs. Look, I didn't say that this was coming from a place of logic. This is coming from a place of emotion. And you're getting, 4-year-old me's first impression of Mr. Toad versus 8-year-old me's first impression of Test Track. So maybe had we swapped those, I would have also swapped my position.
Touche. And I understood all of those things, but it definitely was, as you were describing it.
No, I get it.
She's just describing Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I'm going to stay on that side of Epcot. And I am going to say, first of all, here's the big caveat. I am not saying that what replaced it is not amazing, because I don't need Maz coming through my computer screen and trying to attack me. But Universe of Energy, I thought, was a really, really cool attraction. And I love Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, and I think that is a great ride. But I have had people make a really good point, and they will say, all right, tell me, how did you save the world? What did you do? Like, what was the thing that actually happened in that ride? It's great. I love the music. I love everything about how it is the right level of thrill. It is the perfect level of thrill for a Disney attraction. But there are some things that I think maybe miss the mark when they're trying to make it edutainment, like you were talking about with Test Track. Universe of Energy, when you saw those dinosaurs as a kid, that was an awe-inspiring moment. when you were on that huge ride vehicle that was basically your theater, and it just started moving through and you saw those dinosaurs and you were like, this is incredible. And I know that Dinosaur became a ride and all of that stuff, but even so, this was a completely different thing. Now, I don't like the idea of having, you know, drill baby drill companies sponsoring Disney rides, but I do think that a ride that focused more on actual renewable energy, sustainable energy, that talked about the energy that we're using now and talk about why we're using it. You know, we went from whale oil to the oil that you get from the ground for a reason, but there's also a reason to now progress to new types of energy. And I think that that's something that really is missing from the current version of Epcot that we have now.
Yeah, I never got to do that ride. Um, so I have to take your word for it. But it sounds like something that would be hugely beneficial to Epcot, especially right now, especially to push that edutainment a little bit forward. And I feel like that's gotten a little bit lost. Um, yeah. So I'll fully agree with you there.
And it's not like we don't have a lot of space at Epcot that is going unused, and we do. Like, I understand that we replaced that ride with Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, but that could have gone anywhere, and it might not have caused there to be this gigantic blue building right by the parking lot that does ruin sight. I know what we sound like when we talk about sight lines, but that blue building is ridiculous.
Yeah, it would have been nice to somehow find a compromise. I don't know where they would have put Guardians though.
I mean, that play building is right there. It
It's
would have been the
true.
same thing. It just, you would have gone from a triangle shaped building to a rounded shaped building, and you would shoot out and up into a big blue box that has no theming in the middle of empty Florida space.
I'm going to keep us in Epcot with another attraction that is still currently around. So I'm really going down a path right now. But I'm going to go back to Soarin' over California. I think that was a perfect ride. And look, I fully understand why they changed it. I fully understand how Soarin' over the World fits in Epcot, of all places. That makes perfect logical sense. I get it. But to me, there is something so perfect about that original Soarin' ride. And it's not just nostalgia, because I was able to ride it again just a couple years ago, so fresh memory in my head. I just think it's a little bit of a better version in the sense that I think the scenes flow together a little better. I like that, where you sit in the theater isn't quite so big of a deal. Like you still get a great experience without having the Eiffel Tower, look like it's bent in half. I think that's really important for an auditorium like that. There is something about that orange scent that is like quintessential Disney to me. And I don't know if it's me conflating that with Orange Bird, but I feel like that's just such a perfect little scent burst to have. And I think that Soarin' over the World is great. I love getting to see all the different places. And I think I would miss California less if the CGI wasn't quite so off in certain spots or quite so apparent. Because I think in every scene you go through, there's at least one part where you're looking at it and you're going, oh, that's not real. This is computer animated. Or, wow, why are all the buildings curving at the tip? Because I'm sitting, on the edge. And I do think that takes you out of it a little bit. And for me personally, I didn't feel that so much with California.
So, first of all, I'm not going to sit here in my Dodgers hat and Dodgers shirt and say I don't love Soarin' over California, and I don't have a big place in my heart for the state of California. I do, and I love that version. It is my favorite version of it. I do like it more than Soarin' Around the World. I do wish that we could have it periodically, sort of like we do now, but maybe just for a festival. Like, we always have it for Festival of the Arts, or we always have it for Flower and Garden because of the orange smell. I definitely think that would be a good way to go about it, to keep rotating them. Not that we get a different show depending on when we're there during the day, like that I wouldn't like. But I think that if they had it a couple times a year where you could go and you could see Soarin' over California, I think that would be really, really good. I don't know if there's a statute of limitations over inside information that you get from Disney, but I was on a call with, when I was a travel agent. I haven't been a travel agent in over 3 years, and this call was probably 6 years ago. And the woman from Disney goes, for all the talk and no matter how much people complain online, they are never bringing back Soarin' over California because we can't sell Adventures by Disney.
I mean, hey, I get it.
The new Soarin' Around the World is essentially a commercial for Adventures by Disney. And that is one of the reasons that I do think it will always stay. But I think that original version of Soarin' over California was such a breakthrough in theme park entertainment. Just even not just as an attraction or as a ride, but as an experience itself. Like, it was a next level experience that we got. And I am glad that we didn't do this the way that we were originally going to do it, and we didn't do a top 10 or anything like that, because I think we still have some attractions in Epcot that we want to get to, and we could do an episode sometime in the future. At some point, we can come back, we can finish Epcot, we can do Hollywood Studios, and we could do Disney's Animal Kingdom, because maybe this was a good conversation to sort of remind us of all the stuff that has changed over the years. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me and letting me talk about it.
This has been episode 239 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but we will be back next Thursday with episode 240. We are getting close to 250 episodes. I had no idea that we would be able to make this thing last this long when we started. I'm not sure yet who will be joining me, but we will absolutely be talking about the Destination D23 announcements from this upcoming weekend in Florida. Until then, have a great week.